So we are certainly all familiar with energy outages. I think in the last 5 years, the average number of severe weather events has doubled over the previous 5 years and almost tripled over the last 20-year average. So there really has been more to react to if you're operating an electricity network or a power network or a generation asset. It's kind of a constant drumbeat of major storms and weather events that are making it difficult to operate reliably power networks. And so this is a big deal for our economy, for individuals, and as we'll even hear for the military. It is a big deal, and it's an important thing to solve. And there's been a lot of activity in looking at the many different elements of how you address network resiliency and how you actually kind of retrofit the current ones and look to more innovative ways to continue to build power networks that are more resilient. Even President Obama, in his State of the Union address, mentioned the term resilient self-healing grid, which I think many people in the audience scratched their heads at, but those of us here knew exactly what he was talking about. And it is an important effort underway in the government, the military, and among the power operators, network operators, and generators to make sure that we do have a resilient grid. So this is a timely topic, and with me today I've got some experts on that topic. They can talk about their relationship to it, and then we'll take questions too as we continue our discussion. So down at the end we have Judith Lagano from NRG Energy. We have Anthony Lucas from the U.S. Department of Energy here. We have Major Brandon Newell from the Marine Corps, and Jalal Mapar from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. So welcome, folks. I guess one question for all of you out there: how many of you have experienced a power outage in the last year due to an extreme weather event? Including myself. That's too many hands, right? That needs to be like 20%, not 70%. Yeah, I certainly have. I'm from Boston, and we've had our fair share in the last few years. I found myself sleeping on a neighbor's floor in October 2011 when they had a major storm in Boston. The power went out for almost a week, and I think that was personally, you really see power outages that you're used to growing up, where it's out for a half hour, an hour or two, and it's just kind of fun to have candles. It really does change the equation when it's out for days and it's cold. And I think that we've seen that with Superstorm Sandy. We've seen it with just numerous storms around the U.S. that this becomes a very big deal when network outages last more than a day or two, and that's been consistent over the last few years. So there's a lot to think about and a lot to address to make sure that doesn't happen as often as it does. So there's been an interesting report out just in the last month from EPRI, the Electric Power Research Institute, and they on this topic of resilience, and they did a pretty extensive research and survey of the electric utility and power industry about resiliency, and what they came up with was really think about it in three ways: prevention, recovery, and survivability. So there's three ways that you can address this, and they identified ways in which that was ongoing today with innovations, with best practices, a lot of new technologies brought to bear on this, all along that chain. So prevention, there were things like undergrounding of power lines, which is very expensive, but once you do it, you really have a much more reliable power network, or certainly a distribution grid, than currently is the case in many areas. To things like cybersecurity efforts, where you get ahead of attacks or outages caused by cyber attacks by deploying a very robust cybersecurity infrastructure. And that, and we'll be talking about that, but as the smart grid gets deployed, the need for cybersecurity is somewhat correlated to the amount of deployment of smart grid. As the communication networks begin to interconnect more widely, all points on the grid, then the vulnerability to attack actually increases. So cybersecurity is really going to become a more important topic as time goes on. So some of the benefits of the smart grid then have to be addressed in terms of their vulnerabilities as well. Recovery, so load reduction, demand response programs, GIS systems, doing a better job of identifying where outages are and how to recover those, and then survivability, which is really an interesting thing around storage, renewable energy generation, distributed generation, microgrids, a lot of interesting things to just make the survivability of networks more robust. And so there's a tremendous amount of technology and activities underway to demonstrate that. So with that, why don't we just go to our panel. Do you want to start, Judith? And just a quick introduction of who you are, what you do, but then also some comments on what is your relationship to this topic then. So, how are you, besides who you are, what are you doing about this topic of resiliency and restoration?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's Judith Lagano. I'm Vice President of Asset Management for NRG Energy, Inc. NRG is a Fortune 300 company, and we are challenging the way we think about and use energy in the United States. We deliver cleaner and smarter energy choices for consumers. We are the largest independent power producer in the U.S. with nearly 49,000 megawatts of mix of generation, including fossil fuel generation, nuclear generation, wind power, and solar power. We are the largest owner of solar electricity in the country, utility scale solar. We have 450 megawatts or so in operation and over 700 megawatts under construction. NRG has much to offer in the way in which restoration can be accomplished cleanly and efficiently, as well as mitigating the impacts of outages and strengthening resiliency of the electric system. When you talk about prevention can come in the form of smart grid technology and employing technologies that are communicating between load and generation and sensing issues developing on the system, and then taking load off the system in advance of a problem happening. So you can do that with critical load, you can do that with the smart grid technology so that when there is an issue, you have less of an impact. So that is, that there is so much yet on the verge of happening in that area, such that we can use smart grid again to mitigate impacts and potentially prevent impacts, or when there's high system demand, to communicate again between load and generation and the grid itself, so that we can potentially mitigate and lessen the impact and the frequency of such interruptions. The advancements in technologies have a place in traditional restoration, but needs to change to incorporate new players such as distributed generation, including solar and other clean technologies, microgrids and smart grids, as I was speaking of before, electric vehicles and mobile services, and other forms of clean backup generation. In addition, the technologies need to evolve to allow generation solutions to be multi-purposed to provide self-supply when needed, when there's an interruption, as well as grid support. So we have to think about generation on many different levels and think about multi-purposing that to help us kind of weather these, what seem to be, and I agree, extended outages that when I was growing up it was a couple hours here and there, and unfortunately it's become a week and a half, 2 weeks from where I am in Connecticut.
Good afternoon. First, thanks for the opportunity to participate on this panel. This topic is very close to me as far as what we do in our job. Once again, my name is Anthony Lucas. I'm the Federal Program Manager and Energy Response Director for the Department of Energy, Office of Electricity and Energy Reliability, if you will. Part of my job is to work with the various utilities across the nation, not just the utilities, but also the natural gas and petroleum industry as well, to help maintain the energy infrastructure during major disasters and look at steady state opportunities to leverage to, as we say, to provide more resiliency to the infrastructure as a whole. Our office, we are the point of contact or the advisors to the White House during major disasters and to DHS and to other federal entities during major disasters, and trying to coordinate and cooperate and to help utilities or the industry to get the infrastructure back up as soon as possible. Our job, one of our major concerns, well, not major concerns, but one of the issues that we normally face is integrating policy, integrating technology, integrating R&D, integrating all of this various areas that we could leverage, and bringing that to the forefront during these major disasters. So that's something that our office is really intimately involved in, not just looking at the technology side of the house, but the policies as well, because you got to have that policy and you got to have that operational construct to bring that to the forefront during major disasters. As far as, like I said before, our primary job during major disasters is to advise and to work with the utilities to also look at stovepipes within the system that are basically maybe reducing the estimated time of restoration. That's something that we're also working on as well, to figure out what are the ways and what are technologies that we can leverage to speed that restoration time up. So, for example, we may want to have a force multiplier that we haven't thought about before as far as customers. The customers are not just they're just not impacted, but we can also use them and leverage what their mobile devices to get good situational awareness, get good damage assessments, as far as just taking pictures of power lines being down. That helps speed up the process more if we can get that information, report that information to the utilities. That then saves them from having just to have one guy go out and just check the line itself. It helps to identify the process and speed up the restoration process. So we're looking at it from a macro and both at a micro level of ways, policies, technologies, and operations that we can help to integrate and make the energy restoration process quicker.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me in the back? Away? Yes, cool. All right, so I'm Major Brandon Newell. I am the technology lead for the Marine Corps Expeditionary Energy Office, focused on how do we power Marines on the battlefield. So, first question might be, why would a Marine be sitting on this panel? Something related to grid and resiliency and everything else. I'd ask you, what is the difference between responding to Sandy, where there is no power to tap into for first responders, and then responding in Haiti? There is no difference for the ability of those coming to support and help to tap in or to provide power for themselves or provide power for the community. So with the Marine Corps, you have the world's expert at being ready in a moment's notice to go within days to anywhere in the world and being self-resilient, self-reliant. And so that's my involvement here, and that's why I've been asked to be here. It's really from a humanitarian aid and disaster relief mindset, beyond even the borders of our country. And so, like I said, Marines have to be equipped and prepared to go anywhere, and they have to be able to power themselves. I would tell you that historically, how we've done that, through simple spot generation of combustion engines and diesel-based fuel, is not something to mirror and mimic. I will tell you that where we know that we are going with microgrids and with hybrid systems, is what I would recommend that you follow our lead in. I've had experience with NGOs and USAID and how they respond, specifically in Haiti. They have very similar problems, but they have it exponentially more because they're less equipped, they're less prepared at a moment's notice, and they have less infrastructure behind them to prepare them for it, and especially once they get on the ground. So we have just recently, actually 3 weeks ago, hosted a brief to industry where we share the learning but also the direction that the Army and the Marine Corps are going in with hybrids and microgrids. At a subcomponent level, we've taken a look at how important is energy storage to me, how important is solar to me, based on what type of loads I have, what type of loads I can anticipate, the randomness of the loads, or the variability in those loads. That's the problem of spot generation as we do it now. And that's why we've had to go to hybrids and microgrids in the future. And so that's what I offer. If anyone has questions about what we're doing and why we know that we need to do something different than what we've done in the past, be prepared for the future.
Good afternoon. My name is Jalal Mapar. I'm the Director of Resilient Systems Division within DHS Science and Technology Directorate. How many are familiar with our organization by show of hands, Science and Technology at DHS? Okay. We are pretty much like an analog of what ARPA-E is to DOE, except we are for DHS. Our portfolio is entirely based on developing solutions, technological solutions for components, and as it relates to this panel here, we also worry about the critical infrastructure. In that regard, we work very closely with our infrastructure protection components within DHS. And as some of you, if not all of you know, that we refer to the critical infrastructure in terms of about 17 or 18 key sectors, electrical grid being one of them. And with regards to the grid itself, we are looking at the grid in terms of developing some solutions that could enhance the resilience of these systems, help with response and recovery activities, as well as safety of the first responders who have to respond to some of these things. As I'm sure most of you know, natural hazards keep happening and happening and happening. One thing that we know that is for certain is that they keep happening every year, and their frequency is going up. We worry about the hurricanes. This year, Sandy was, of course, the big one, and as I'm sure you know better than anybody else, and those who are from the New York, New Jersey area, we have to worry about the impact of such events as they increase on the critical infrastructure, on the electrical grid. When we look at the transmission aspect of electricity, we find out that that's a very, very vulnerable area where these transformers are really hard to procure. It takes a long time to get them in. In that regard, we have started a program that's called the Recovery Transformer, and we are developing a system that's portable. And whereas you have to spend about in the order of months to get one of these procured and put it in place, with the new system that we have, with some of the specs 600 MVA, we can actually deploy one of these on a flatbed, on a truck, take it to the location, and deploy it in a matter of days. Get it started within a day, get it set up within a couple of days and get it started and start distribution, transmitting power. That's one of the key areas that we're doing, and we are running a pilot right now in Houston, and it's going pretty well. And if you would like to get more information, my program manager is here, and she can give you all the information on that. That's on the transmission side of things. With regards to the distribution, we're looking at developing, deploying some superconducting cables. And this is another area where we're looking at improving the efficiency. And we have a partnership with AMSC and ABB. And we also work with Con Ed. And right now we're scheduled to do a pilot activity in 2014. It's about 170 meters of cable. And we'll be happy to share the results with you later on. One of the other areas that we are focusing on with regards to the electrical grid is one of the largest constituents of DHS is the first responder community. These are the people who respond to disasters. When something happens, they have to go out there. They put their lives on line to save people, do things right. We have to worry about their safety. One of the things that we hear from them and we learn, including what we have seen during Sandy, is that the cables being down, these responders worry about their safety. They don't know if it's safe to get in there. So we started a small project looking at disconnect, basically trying to secure these cables so that they do a graceful degradation so that the first responders, when they go there, they're actually have got some degree of self-assurance, confidence that they're going to be safe walking into that area. So those are the three primary areas that we're targeting, from transmission, distribution, and also safety. Now, with regards to my division, which focuses on resilience, and resilience being the topic of today, as you mentioned, President Obama mentioned that several times during his speech. Resilience is not just about the electrical grid. We also have to worry about resilience in the context of response, recovery, and helping our first responders. Many of you know that when you see a firefighter or an EMT or law enforcement, or specifically a firefighter, they carry a lot of weight. They carry radios, they carry equipment, they have sensors, and most of these things are dependent on batteries. I know that ARPA-E is looking at batteries. There are private entities out there looking at batteries. About 2.5 years ago, through a dialogue with the first responder community, we kind of captured a little requirement that said, if we are able to reduce the weight of these equipment that they carry with them, that is to say, if we're able to reduce the size of these batteries, we could do them a great service. So we started a flat battery program, and the idea was that maybe we could develop a paper-thin battery of some sort that could become a layer that could go inside a jacket. So I've got some show and tell. This is what we've developed so far. This is going into manufacturing this year. This little thing that you see in here, which is a prototype, this is equivalent to a 1 AA battery. I can talk to you about what the sauce is inside, but this is 1 AA battery. It is flexible. It comes in different sizes, shapes, and forms, and it will last for a year. And the cost that we're targeting is probably in the order of about 10 to 15 cents. So these are some of the areas that we're looking at as far as our contribution to improving the resilience of the individual, first responder community, as well as the electrical grid. Obviously, we are looking at microgrids and nanogrids coming up, and we want to work very closely with other agencies as well, including DOE, DOD, and other entities. Thank you.
Great. I think I'll jump up here so you guys can keep your microphones. Well, good. That's a good overview of what you all are involved in. Actually, I'll make one note now that I'm getting this iPad, that you can text your questions, and they will appear right here, so I can answer them. Well, one of my questions is about the concept of the smart grid. It's something that at Greentech Media and GTM Research, where I'm from, we cover a lot, and certainly one thing that's associated. Many things are associated with the smart grid, and I think it promises a lot wrapped up in that term of new customer services, driving energy efficiency and consumer visibility into their energy usage, and a lot of that. But I think also one of the key elements of it and key longer-term values is network reliability. So I'm curious, just from our panel's perspective, when you hear the term smart grid, what do you think is wrapped up in that? And one of the observations that's been made is that the stimulus for the smart grid and a lot of the early activities for the smart grid really just got a lot of two-way digital meters out in the field, but didn't necessarily deploy a lot of the technologies that might be useful in delivering on the promise of network resiliency. And so there's a potential next wave of smart grid infrastructure deployment and questions around how that's going to be paid for and the like. But it is an interesting topic, and there are a lot of technologies that fall under that umbrella of smart grid. So I'm just curious, from your perspective, are you involved in this concept of the smart grid, and any comments on where it is and potentially what it's going to deliver to us?
Maybe I can take a quick start and pass it on to you guys. Remember, I'm from Science and Technology Directorate at DHS. So what we think about, our portfolios are related to developing solutions and technologies in that area. It is not a concern, but from an innovation point of view, one of our biggest challenges that we see is this notion of physical cybersecurity, cyber-physical security, as it relates to the smart grid. If you want to put things on the network, everybody has seen the CNN reports a couple years ago, blowing up the transformers through sending some code and so on. That's an area that we have to worry about. Sometimes there are complexities that we have to worry about. And of course, I'm from the government, so I have to tell you, we have to worry about budgets as well, because some of these things cannot be done alone, have to be done in partnerships, and you can't do them free of charge. And there are some areas that require a lot of research. So I think the value that they provide is significant. The impact is huge. But I think we have to do a good job of identifying we have to do a good job of doing the initial system analysis, if you will, to really understand what it is that we're going after and what benefits we get out of that. Because our leaders keep asking us about provide us the impact so that we can invest in it.
Yeah, right. Other comments? Judith, you look eager.
At NRG, we just recently permitted a repowering of a conventional gas and oil-fired steam boiler to clean wood biomass, which is what's called a Class 1 renewable in my particular area of the world. And this facility happens to be located fairly close to a naval base. So with the use of a dedicated feeder, let's say, connecting what is now a clean generation resource to a naval subbase, in combination with smart grid technology, the generator and the load, which is the subbase, can read, the subbase can take power off of the grid or directly from the renewable generator and respond to load and pricing on the system, and it becomes a commercial endeavor in terms of optimizing resources most cost effectively and doing it in a environmentally friendly manner. So to me, smart grid is the whole chain and not just the technology and the software and the electronics, but providing that whole value chain, starting from a renewable generator and ending up in decision making around a commercial venue in terms of how best can I optimize load and reduce costs, because after all, we're all running a business of some sort or another. So to me, that really is the sphere of what smart grid technology can do.
Okay.
I take a quick stab at this. From our office, or from the Infrastructure Security and Energy Restoration Office, we're looking more as a customer of this. From advanced metering, from the outage management system, integration and getting that information and getting a better common operating picture quicker will help the utilities, help them expedite the restoration process. The more information as communication is flowing back and forth from the advanced metering, from the control systems, and et cetera, it will help identify some of the areas of concern to better address, like I said, to expedite that restoration process that you may not have been able to do a few years ago. As that is being pushed out, hopefully that'll be, we can integrate that with social media. We can integrate that with other technologies that can help leverage having a better common operating picture. As far as cost, I'm not going to touch that. I'm not going to touch the cost. Who's going to pay for it? So.
Do you feel like we're getting there? Do you feel like this smart grid momentum, that there is momentum, that we're actually, the right technologies are being developed and we're making some progress toward a resilient network?
As far as me, like I said, my office, I'm not the subject matter expert for the smart grid. There are others in our office that are the subject matter experts. From my perspective, yes, there are gains that's being made. But with any new technology that you put on the field, right, it takes time to develop it. Right. It takes time to integrate it. It takes time for everybody to customize themselves to what is available, what the applications may bring. So I think it's you have to look at it as we develop this technology and this technology being distributed. People have to understand it. They have to feel comfortable using it, understanding what the issues are, understanding there's other research that has to be done as far as security. There are other things that have to be bring to the table so that people can really feel comfortable using this type of system.
If I could just make a comment to pick up, and I don't mean to interrupt you. Look, 20 years ago, nobody knew about this. Mm-hmm. Well, it wasn't there.
Right.
I think I'm going to make a quote here. Smart grids are inevitable. They are going to happen. Mm-hmm. So the question is, how do we think about them smartly so that we don't develop something that we have to go redesign in about 5-10 years and worry about things? So a little bit of upfront thinking I think is very important, and that's an area where science, technology, R&D can help identify some of those gaps, whether it relates to the cyber, to the network, to the security, to the cost-related issues. But there are activities. I think every organization is looking at some aspect of that. I know from our side, we are looking at the smart grids in the form of cyber-physical and understanding what happens to the grid and being able to identify, to pinpoint if something goes down so that we can provide that situational awareness to whoever the users are, whether they're the utilities, the recovery crew, or whoever they are.
Okay. Did you have a comment, Major?
Yeah, I'll just offer that my opinion would be that we should take a building block approach to this. Once we're trying to interface with the large grid, we have a lot of issues that we discussed here. What if we started and focused our efforts on implementing this into small microgrids that are contained? So in the Marine Corps, we have the need to have communications back and forth for our future microgrids, that we understand the loads, and the loads don't come on whenever we can't support them. There may be a delay or something like that. And if we took it a step further, whether it's Google's facilities or whether it's a island base, essentially, you could then implement these types of things and have it as a trial period, and before you enter yourself into the concerns that we discussed up here, especially security concerns from Homeland's perspective.
Okay. I actually have a quick dumb grid question, which any of you can weigh in on. I've heard it's very expensive to do widespread undergrounding of power lines as a way to make the network more resilient. But it's a fairly dumb and straightforward way to just get the power lines off from poles and get them underground so that very common way in which power goes out is at least eliminated. One versus the other, making this very innovative, resilient, distributed sensor network, digital energy versus getting the lines underground. Is it an either-or question, or and in the near term, is it worth the investment to just make that? I know it's a big deal in Connecticut and Boston, a lot of the Northeast. Yeah, we're very exposed with lines up in the air.
I'll take a quick stab at that. It's not just it's just not an estimate or a relatively of cost. It's also feasibility. You also have to look at, if you do put transmission or distribution lines on the ground in a beach area, that's not probably practical, because you will have a lot of flooding, and that then impacts the restoration time that you're going to have to get that power back up and running. So it's really, I think you have to look at it from a community by community basis to determine what is the best approach. What are their risks? What are their vulnerabilities? What are the things that they're going to be faced with as a community, and then look at how they're going to, what is the best approach to do that? Is it putting it on the ground? Is it just basically elevating substations? It's a really, you have to really look at it from a community system approach to determine what is the best way to protect that system at the local level, and then going up and metering it up from there as well. Yes, it is relatively expensive, but once again, that's the investments that you have to look at the risks, look at the vulnerabilities to identify what is the best approach.
Okay. There's a bunch of questions coming in, so let me make sure that the audience is heard. One comes for two, Jalal and Anthony. Are you considering grassroots strategies for teaching resilience thinking to citizenry? So away from technology innovation, but just down to, is there a way to actually bring this out to people so they do a better job in reacting to these
So this is an area that we are facing on an hourly basis, and this is, what is resilience? Even within our components and within our organization, there is this syntax and semantic issue with regards to what resilience is. Another aspect of this is that talking to the communities, there are communities that believe that technology is not going to solve everything for them as it relates to resilience. They believe that the education aspect of things is more important, and the process, procedures, and getting it into their operational activities is more important. And I believe we kind of agree with both sides. It has to be done. It's not just a pure, simple technology development and deployment issue. Education is really important. So in that regard, we're not touching everything that we see, but we're targeting, for example, in our area, we work with the state and local communities very closely. In that regard, we work with the fire departments, police departments, the first responder community, as a way of getting our message across, because we find them to be our channels to the community to the schools, and so on. So, yeah, it is important. We're very cognizant of that, and we're very much aware of that, and we're trying to do something about it. It has to be done at the grassroots level as well.
Okay. Anthony, have you talked about that?
Yes. We, from the Department of Energy, we've done a lot of research, and we've also done a lot of outreach with the various entities or the various stakeholders. From an energy perspective, you got to recall that you have your individual homeowners. You also have your business owners that have to look at resiliency. What's resiliency for them? Then you have to take it up to what is the owners and operator. What does the resiliency mean for them as well? And then keep going up from there, because resiliency can mean many different things in many different areas of parts of the country. What's resilient for Los Angeles is probably going to be totally different than what's resilient for New York. So one of the things that we've been doing is we have state energy assurance plans that each state is looking at as far as developing state energy assurance guides, basically, to look at what are the things and what does a resilient community or resilient state look like with the various energy. Could be, like I said, power, could be fuel, could be different elements to look at. And what are the things and the aspects to educate their populace to determine what is going to make me as an individual more resilient, because that's really where it starts. You have your national resilience, but each individual has to be resilient and cognizant of the things that they need to be aware of, especially from an energy perspective. So, for example, you may have someone that's inherently that's on a respiratory device. Of course, we need to have they have to have in their mind, well, if power goes out, then what is my next step? What do I need to do? What does the community hold? Some utilities have identification protocols basically in their system to identify people that are special needs within their jurisdictions to help maintain that if the power does go out, we know that this particular location is a need. So I think you have to look at it from both, like I said, a system approach, but an individual approach to look at resiliency going forward.
Okay. Well, on that topic then, though technology driven, there's a few questions in here about distributed generation and storage. Is that, if people have solar on their roof and a battery in their basement, can they actually become, not necessarily off-grid, but can they become resilient in the case of an outage? I mean, today if you have PV, the power goes out, you still go out, even if the panels are on the roof. Is there a longer-term vision where more distributed generation, more distributed energy storage, and how much do you think that is a part of a long-term solution versus really putting it on the retail electricity, the grid operators to just make their grids resilient?
I'll take
Judith,
that one. How about a battery in your car in your garage that gives you 1 to 2 days worth of power after you've been out of power at your home for a week? I mean, think about rationing your own power off your battery that's stored electricity that you can use in a storm. I think my 3 kids would be arguing over who gets those, 2 hours a day or whatever it is that if you can ration. So, electric vehicles and what one thing that NRG is doing now, partnered in 2011, we partnered with the University of Delaware to create something called EV2G, which is electric vehicle grid interaction. And with the help of PJM, the system operator in that particular area, we have partnered with BMW, and there are 15, what we have is 15 Mini Coopers that kind of form a mini power plant such that we can provide frequency regulation to the grid through smart grid technology. Here it is again, smart grid technology. And there is the eventuality in order to provide not just a frequency regulation where you're helping to keep 60 hertz in line, but to actually put power back onto the grid when the grid needs it and you don't need your car. So, I mean, that is absolutely a vision and one that I think everyone that has a car can relate to, and everyone that's been out of power, that if they were able to tap into their own car in their garage would be very excited about.
If I could offer something, I would offer that's simply asset management at the household level. The Marine Corps, we have a vision that, in our case, we have vehicles that are not utilized at all times of the day. They're also often static or even idling. Here I have an engine that's very powerful to me, but I don't need it for what its true purpose or its main purpose was. Why am I not tapping into it? Now, historically, when I do a spot generation and I'm tying my energy source to my load at all times, that's a no-brainer. I can't do it. But when I move to a hybrid system, which in some ways is what you're offering your house would then be, I then don't need to tie that source to my load at all times of the day. I simply need to transfer that energy into some type of storage that will sustain me, and then come back with that vehicle from time to top it off. And so I would offer that Marine Corps is moving to an asset management mindset where take advantage of what's there in your possession already, understand what it's capable of, and utilizing it that way. And I believe we could do that at a household level eventually as well.
Any other thoughts on distributed generation and storage? No? Good. Here's one about utilities. Some utilities already pull Twitter feeds into sophisticated outage management systems such as SDG&E. What can be done on a federal level to encourage more utilities to invest in cutting-edge OMS, if you believe that actually is cutting-edge OMS? From the federal level, how are you guys talking to utilities and helping drive these kind of solutions to them? A Twitter feed in an outage management system, that kind of thing. Is that a federal role, or does that ultimately come down to PUCs at the state level?
Here's how we see it. Remember I said that we work very closely with our infrastructure protection component within DHS, where they focus on 17, 18 key sectors. By way of working with them, we get these requirements from them. So one of the most recent things has been to provide some analytical capability that really pulls social media and even couples that with aerial imagery as a way of providing situational awareness to these key sectors, of course, the electrical grid, whose end users are the utilities, so that they could use that to help improve the resilience. So you see the value chain in terms of what we're trying to do. And that's an area where we're focusing on pulling these things. Now, the social media space, of course, everybody knows is huge. What are you going to go after? So we're not developing anything from scratch, but mostly pulling these things and trying to provide some ability, tool set for them. Even working with some of our friends with DOE as well to see if we can provide these analytical capabilities to help them understand what's going on. Because listen, if you can understand what's going on quickly, you respond to it quickly, you mitigate things, you recover faster. And I think that's in some ways a definition of resilience. Okay.
Any other comments?
From a federal perspective, I would say more of a facilitation role, more of a facilitator, more of a, as I said earlier, a force multiplier to work with the utilities, because the utilities have the best idea of what's going to work within their systems. And then basically passing that back to the PUCs and working with the state energy offices. That is one of our focuses, is working through the state energy office, the public utility commissions, and through the EMAs to figure out what is the best approach to enhance their system. What is the best approach to look at social media? Because there are, like you said, there's various different things that's happening with the social media with, you get on Twitter and Facebook and you see the various outages that's happening right now and then, but it may not be on the company site. And so those are the things that we're working, and our leadership is working with the utilities of basically saying, hey, look, this is an important area. We have to have public messages that's going out to the general public. Why is that important? Because if the general public doesn't know that they're going to have power outages for 6 or 7 days, that's problematic, because guess what? They may not be planning for that. And then that doesn't help manage expectations across the nation or across an area that's really out of power. So we have to integrate those technologies to where that we can push information out to the various customers as soon as possible, and also bringing that information in so that we can analyze that information, so we can push it out, basically giving them the great or the most accurate ETRs, estimated time of restoration, so that they can make those decisions. One of the key things that we constantly hear across the nation is we need a good estimated time of restoration, because as a customer, and when I say a customer, not just you as an individual homeowner, but as an industry owner and operator, they're spending millions of dollars based on how long they're going to be without power. They could be closed, they could be open, they may send you workers different locations. So it's really based upon that, and we really have to get that right.
Okay. Good.
Can I take this opportunity before everybody leaves for the day? We really want to hear from you. It would really help us to understand the kind of things that you are doing with regards to the space that was just discussed in terms of the value chain, the value proposition, the social media, aerial imagery, or any of those related technologies could provide the utilities, the end users, the whole community, organizations, state, local level. And also, if there are any private companies, industry out here or anywhere else, if they are doing anything in that area, we really want to hear as far as what they're doing, because we don't want to repeat what they're doing. Maybe we'll just integrate or customize what they're doing to provide the solutions that we're looking for. So we really appreciate your input.
Good. Well, this question I think is probably a question that's been asked at every panel, but in the spirit of the innovators in the audience, what are the key areas that need new products and new development? So do the work for the entrepreneurs. Give them your best idea. They can commercialize it. Any gaps out in technology development, any opportunities that you've seen that they can exploit?
Well, I think, let me work the problem backward. Any technologies that we are looking for, as far as the gaps and so on, cost is a major driver for us. So really, it's cost driving the design and innovation in some aspects. I think the areas that we are looking at right now from S&T in support of our customers, our components, the community, state, local, critical infrastructure, transmission, distribution, safety. I think those are the three areas that I talked about. If somehow we can bring the cost of developing these things and deploying these things and maintaining them, if we can reduce the cost, that's a huge driver for us, for the nation.
From an energy perspective, I guess if someone can create a predictive modeling tool for ice, hurricanes, and different types of disasters that is somewhat accurate, I think that would go a long way from an energy perspective to identify what the issues are. And I have to touch on that a little bit, because predictive analysis is very important, because that helps the utilities identify locations, start looking at resource management, asset management. How are they going to initiate their mutual aid? Some of the things that work within that process is, when they're doing their mutual aid, is basically what resources are going to come with those resources coming from North Carolina to help New York. So if they have a good idea of what's going to be damaged within their system, based on the predictive modeling, based on some of their vegetation management that they may have been doing, and looking at the various issues that may happen, they're able then to really manage the disaster or the energy restoration process even better. Because a lot of times they don't have that. Just having a tool like a little tool like this, basically, and everybody know what this is, to basically help manage the process, the outage management process, is a great avenue. Because if I can use this from an energy storm restoration manager, look at what my resources are, look at what's damaged, what resources are coming in, what's the supply chain, that really then helps me with the restoration process and actually helping manage expectations. That's one area.
I'd offer that in my realm, it's all about energy density. And energy density has a slightly different definition for me and for the military. And then HADR response in general, I would say. What I tell people is I never care about your wattage rating of your system. Your kilowatt rating of your system means nothing to me, because kilowatts mean nothing. Kilowatt hours mean everything. So what can I tap into at the end of the day that actually I will be able to utilize? And so energy density for my world is how much energy at the end of the day do I have in comparison to the weight in cube it took me to get it there, and in comparison to the footprint it takes up on the ground. And so that is where we were always trying to drive technology, is to improve those type of energy density.
Okay.
I think from my perspective, when we talk about distributed solar and the opportunities around that, I think solar is becoming increasingly attractive to consumers for, let's say, two reasons. One, lower cost panels are enabling grid parity, or will get there very quickly. And two is energy independence during outages. And if a distributed system is automatically cut off such that you can't access the solar system that you put on your roof for that purpose, then that's pretty aggravating, right? So, and that is going to be a deterrent, I think, for that from really taking off. But you know, in the same vein, we have to make sure that the line workers that are working on restoration can do that safely. So being able to, isolate and make sure that these systems that we're putting in a distributed manner, we get the most out of them, so that they are most cost effective, but yet make sure that we can protect the folks that are doing the critical restoration service as well. So, advances in those technologies, I think, would be appreciated across the board.
Okay. There's a question for Major Newell. Could developments that you're undertaking in the military be coordinated with other civilian groups? Is that happening? Could it happen? How are what you're doing around resiliency, is that being shared outside of the military?
I would say that we build nothing ourselves in the Marine Corps. I mean, it is always whether it's a purchase of a system that already exists, but we have found that there is no system that exists that can handle the rigor of what we require of systems. So it's always a partnership between the service and whichever companies are performing on some contract. Because there's an understanding that has to be shared on what resiliency is in our world, what marine proof is in our world, as far as being able to survive the conditions that we put our systems through. And so we always launch into a research and development type contract with multiple awards, so that as you move forward, you are hedging your bets, if you will, that one of those performers can actually get to the type of specs that you're looking for, or performance that you're looking for, and then you can go into production.
Okay, that makes sense. Here's another on what is the business case for outage management? Who pays? The Department of Homeland Security, DOE, especially at the transmission level. I guess larger than that. The stimulus for the smart grid is kind of run out, and so federal money for smart grid deployments is dried up and doesn't look like it's coming back. But some of these things, if they're considered interstate or at a regional or federal level for resiliency, is there federal dollars flowing to this, or is it rate cases at PUCs that are still ultimately going to pay for this?
I don't know if you're aware, but last week there was a new PPD, that's a presidential policy directive, PPD 21, that came out, and it's full of security, cyber, and resilience all in the same package. Typically with these PPDs, they kind of become guidance, doctrine, mandates for going after certain things. For example, in the case of PPD 8, where the focus is preparedness, more often than not, we look at those type of policy documents as a way of identifying which areas we need to go after from a technology development point of view, and trace it back to some policy at a national level. PPD 21 came out just last week. I think everybody's trying to digest that and understand what it means in terms of resilience, and what it means in terms of what sort of things have to be deployed. In the case of electrical grid, what is resilience? What do you develop? Who pays for it? Is it the utilities? Is it the DHS grant dollars? Is it the state and local communities that use those fundings to procure things as a way of showing that they're resilient? It's being evaluated right now.
Okay. Any other?
From a DOE perspective, I'm not aware of any money. Are you aware of any additional money right now that's going to be funded for particular projects right now? But for the most part, I think it's still going to be up to the utility provider itself and the customer itself and the PUCs to determine how far and how proactive they're going to be within their own system to make those enhancements going forward.
Okay. Well, we're down to the final minutes here. For any of you sort of off the grid and not submitting questions the Twitter way, any questions, comments that you want to address to the panel or any of the individuals on the panel? There you go.
The New York Times last week, I think, said that our entire power system generation is vulnerable to being taken out with a cybersecurity attack. So far as I can tell, nobody is doing anything about it in a real sense. who you are, that you'd like to tell me about.
All right. Big cybersecurity question. We should probably start with you, Jalal.
You are from New York?
Originally, yes.
Okay. Is this open press?
Yeah, there are reporters there. I can see at least one, probably two.
The reports of cyber attacks are, I believe, are in the media. And if they are there, there's something going on.
He's paid to be cryptic.
I can't speak for the department as a whole. But I can share with you, I have heard stories from some of the state and local levels where they are getting attacked, even on their public utilities and all kinds of things, coming from, the attacks usually coming from the usual places.
Excellent.
Yeah, we are doing something about it.
All right.
Let me add on to that.
I'm not trying to be funny. I can't speak on behalf of the agency or the federal government, as I'm sure my other colleague here from DOE would say. Cybersecurity is becoming an important element in every organization. In our organization, the Science and Technology Directorate, we have a division called Cybersecurity Division, and their focus is on looking at all types of detection, protection, mitigation, response, recovery activities that relate to cyber attacks.
Yes, there's various things that's being done from various departments and various different agencies. Excuse me. It's not just the Department of Energy, it's not just Department of Homeland Security, it's not just the FBI, it's various entities are playing a role within identifying the issues and working with the various utilities and owners and operators to look at ways to increase if they are vulnerable, increase that vulnerability or help with that vulnerability, identify those issues and work to push that information out to the other utilities as well so they can have more of a lessons learned platform to be able to protect their system as a whole. So it's just not us being able to, the federal department, protecting that one particular private sector utility because they have to take that initiative themselves. But we have to work with them to identify those issues and to address them as much as we possibly can. So yes, there is work that's being done. Can I get into the particulars? No, I can't. But there are some very, very proactive efforts happening in the federal government.
For those of you who are interested in sort of the if you will, the challenging areas in terms of whether it relates to the grid or anything the grid itself or anything that relates to the grid, cyber physical security is becoming very important. So I would encourage you to think along those lines. And as you mentioned, the grid is vulnerable. It will be more vulnerable as we introduce new technologies into the system. And you know how the story goes. The more technologies you introduce to the system, the more risk you introduce to the system. So those are areas from a technology point of view. They're very, very interesting to us. We'd like to kind of hear from you as well on those.
Okay. Any last comment? Oh, I guess we're at time. You can make it really quick?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I don't know about this New York Times story. I'm a research professor at the University of Illinois, and we worked a lot on cybersecurity for the power grid. And I know, as the panelists mentioned, that cybersecurity is not just the focus of AHS or DOE, but 17 agencies that are coordinating their cybersecurity plans and stuff. And, now people ask about, why is the government not doing something about cybersecurity? A few years ago, when the government said, you need to do something about cybersecurity, we want to regulate them, then people are upset that this is private assets. We don't want the government telling us what to do about it. But now the mindset of the utility companies have changed. They realize that cybersecurity is important for their operations and reliability, so things have changed. Ownership is probably more accepted as not as a regulation to be met for compliance, but something that we need to do for our infrastructure. I've been in this cybersecurity research in critical infrastructure space for 5 to 7 years now, and mindset is changing, and I think this will be more accepted. So I guess New York Times actually having an article on this is sort of, perspective.
Good. Okay. Well, join me in thanking my panel. Thank you for coming.